Recommended events are often explained as a list that you can follow when you're implementing events and parameters on your website or your mobile application. Basically, a list of naming conventions you can follow that Google suggests you to use. But the difference between the recommended events and a custom events are, well, there is no difference. The way you implement them and how you go about it is exactly the same. The only difference between a recommended event and a custom event is the naming convention. And if you followed Google's guidelines, it's a recommended event. And if you haven't, it's a custom event. Now, there's more to it than just a naming convention, but let's take a look at why Google's recommending us to use these naming conventions. Google doesn't know if we put an event in what that actually is because, everyone can name something slightly differently. For example, if they had no recommended events around form submissions, and so everyone was calling it slightly differently, if I implemented a form submission event called form_submit, and you implemented an event called form_complete. So these are two completely different events, and Google just wouldn't know what to do with it. They wouldn't know that it's the same thing fundamentally. And so the reason Google's created this idea of recommended events is so that it can have context of what these things actually mean. And the reason that's important is so that they can do some clever stuff with it. And so having a list of recommended events is just a way for Google to anticipate the data coming in and then them know what that is. So for example, there's a whole section there of recommended events for e-commerce events. And this is really important because the event parameter of value attached to any event doesn't mean anything. It's just a parameter called value where you can put a number through and it appears in your reports in GA4. But that value parameter on the purchase event or the ad impressions event means something slightly different. That becomes revenue. And so revenue is one of those things that Google can then populate in all of our reports in GA4. But the only reason it can identify it as revenue is because it's attached to an event that it recognizes as containing revenue. And so this is why recommended events are really important to use, because Google can then do something with them because they understand, they have the context of to what these events are. And e-commerce is a really good example. There's begin checkout, there's add payment info, add shipping info, and obviously the purchase event as well. And so Google can automatically now identify basket abandoners or build funnels from entering the checkout to purchase. And this doesn't happen if everyone used different naming conventions for all of their events. And that's just the e-commerce example. There's other examples in there too. Selecting content, starting a level and completing a level in a video game, for example. These are just different approaches that Google can then do something clever with once it gets into Google Analytics 4. So it might not be doing anything clever with it right now. This is something that will kind of surface over time. They might expand on it down the line as well. So they might take their time kind of releasing these features. But the e-commerce one is the one that, as of recording right now, is available. And this is where they can start to do some predictive modeling. And so using that begin checkout events, the add shipping information events and the purchase events, Google could then start to do predictive modeling to identify users that are likely to purchase in the next 7 days or not likely to purchase in the next 7 days, or the highest spenders. And so having this context can enable this kind of feature to occur. So in a nutshell, recommended events are no different to custom events. It is purely a naming convention that you're using. I would suggest using the recommended events wherever possible because it opens up the doors to interesting things that Google can do with that data down the line. If it's not doing it right now, it will get round to it and release some features down the line potentially. So follow the recommended guidelines if you can. If not, use the custom events. Just know that if you're using the custom events, that Google's never going to understand what those events are and only can work with the recommended events. Anyway, hope that's interesting. That's the reasoning behind recommended events and why Google has even created the idea of suggesting us names to use. And it's purely so that they can have context of what that data means so that they can do some cool, interesting, fun stuff with, which hopefully will be useful to us. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video and I'll catch you in the next one.